So it was just last week where I spoke about how it's important that we stop spreading ill-informed ideas of how gamers are and how they act, and now the President of America has jumped on the bandwagon. And look, I'll recognize that my opinions, those ones expressed in this video, they may offend or may be something that you as a listener disagree with. And if you do, just remember that's fine. Okay, you're allowed to disagree with me, and I'm allowed to disagree with you. This is why we have free-flowing dialogues. And down below is where you should go if you do disagree with me. And you know what, while you're there, why don't you answer the question of this video? Do you think that gun violence and video games have a direct correlation? Otherwise, let's dive in. Last week was a terrible time for America. Multiple mass shootings, multiple issues, multiple causes for concerns, and questions regarding gun control. But the one staple, the one thing that is always to blame, video games and the violence therein. As long as people are on the wrong end of the sanity spectrum, and I say the wrong end because how many people are willing to murder someone, right? Honestly, think about that for a second. Or perform a mass shooting. Or do anything that would harm the public at large at all. That would be what that's what we would call sane, right? If you're not going to do that, you're probably sane. But how many of you would actually be willing to do something like that? Tell me, let me know down below. Again, let me know in the comment section. As long as these things happen, as long as there's video games that are created and are essentially a culture all on their own, as long as these two things happen, as long as they allow people to take on the role of characters who kill people in self-defense or not, as long as video games are violent, people will always place blame on them. The video game made me do it excuse, right? The video game made me do it. That has been used for almost too long. And yet now, like I said last week, we have surely had research done regarding this, right? Regarding the effects of video game violence, regarding how they affect the psyche and how they can change a person from apparently just your average run-of-the-mill next-door neighbor into a mass murdering psycho. We've had research done on this. And yes, video games are apparently the cause for that. Yeah, no worries. Not the different stories you hear online regarding hate speech and how this term in itself is overutilized, or the attention that we pull away from bullying when we decide we're going to bully presidential candidates, or any concern for how easy it is to get a gun, right? None of these things count as a possible reason for gun violence. No. It must actually be the video games. Automatically, that's the ultimate scapegoat. Did you not know that if you haven't been paying attention? Right? Not even movies get as much criticism, even though they do basically the exact same thing to glamorize murder and violence, right? But video games, they're the biggest problem. They're the greatest scapegoat known to man. Honestly, it's funny, right? Only the games are what we consider to be a problem. Nothing else could be a problem at all, right? Now, I'm not going to talk about the amendment rights that Americans have. The gun laws may be a little too relaxed for my liking, right? But does that mean that I believe we need to take their guns away altogether? No. It's part of their constitution, and I'm part of a whole different country. So just to say that my opinion should count is stupid, right? I'm not part of America. I don't belong in America. I'm not an American resident at all. So I'm sorry. And to anyone else who doesn't live in America, nor are they an American citizen, you can scream and you can shout and you can stamp your feet as much as you want, but you're not part of America either. So their rules are their rules, right? That's basically like going to a stranger's house and saying, hey, listen, this is how we're going to operate from now on, okay? Just in case you're wondering, I know how you guys have rules in this house, but now you're going to operate by my rules because I don't think that your rules are good enough, right? That's ridiculous. So if you're not part of America, I don't feel like we have the ability to say anything, really. We can be appalled. Just remember that I'm not saying that we're not allowed to be appalled by things like this, or think that these laws may be too relaxed, or maybe we should have different ideas. But what America does, that's America. Now, over the past week, we've had article after article talk about each of the mass shooters, right? How the San Bernardino shooter was apparently abusive as a partner, or how the El Paso shooter's views somehow echo what Trump had said time and time before, or how each of these men were crazy, right? And look, I'll say this, that makes sense. Men go crazy. We need to address these things before they become huge problems, right? But to simply blame men as a whole is the wrong answer. Now, let's look at these two cases specifically. The San Bernardino shooter was known to be violent by police and did have previous charges for weapons. Does that mean 100% that he's going to go out and murder people or even his partner? No, honestly, it doesn't say that that's what's going to happen. You can't say, well, the police should have done more, because in truth, right, they're probably stretched well beyond their limits, and I'll agree that it's crazy that things like this can be overlooked, and that a history of domestic abuse is not a good sign. But in truth, unless the police were watching this guy for 24 hours a day, they couldn't have stopped this. Okay, they couldn't have stopped this. Honestly, they shouldn't have had to stop something like this. It shouldn't have happened, but they couldn't have stopped it. So we can't blame the police for this. Now, that's two strikes already, right? We can't blame the whole video game industry. We can't blame the police because they knew about this, which is what people have been trying to do. Then there's the question about what's called the boyfriend loophole, and that's I'm basically calling it that in terms of purchasing guns, right? Now, again, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but in short, if you've been convicted of domestic abuse and you're married, it's far more difficult for you to purchase or acquire a gun in America than if you're simply dating someone, okay? That means it's easier to get a weapon that can end someone's life if you're not married, but you're abusing someone, right? That's crazy, but that's American law, okay? Now, for everyone who's blaming this law as a reason this man was able to get guns so quickly, or blaming the American Constitution, consider something very simple. While you may not know where to get guns, I'm betting you that if you did a little bit of research, or you started hanging out with, let's say, less than desirable people, or even just asked around, right? Eventually, it may not happen in 24 hours or in a week, but eventually you'd probably find somebody that could get you a weapon like that. Eventually. That's the key word I'm going to use there, right? And then we would still be in the same place that we're here at today. The guy would still have gotten a gun, and he would still have done this mass shooting. And again, I just want to reiterate, mass shootings are horrible. Then let's look at the El Paso shooter, right? It's been said repeatedly that this is Trump's fault for making hate speech the norm. The manifesto that this guy put out accordingly said that these views predated Trump. So we're going to blame Trump for views that were not stated by him before he was there to state them, and that's what's going to happen. This might be the case. But to blame a politician or to blame anyone else's views for these views, the buck stops with the shooter, right? And I get that. There's chat rooms galore out there, and groups upon groups upon groups of people that are inciting hatred and a mindset that is less than desirable. But to simply say that people like Trump are the reason these things happen, that's basically saying the shooter was justified because we gave him justification. The truth is no. The answer is no. We never give anyone justification to murder anybody, okay? The problem does stem from media outlets who post and distort things that the president says or that other people say. They twist and they change things to mean something completely different. And I'm not pointing any fingers to people like Vox or BuzzFeed. I'm not pointing any fingers to companies like that at all. But I'm sure that there are tons of examples out there, right? There are groups and articles upon articles I'm sure that you could find that basically twist and distort and do what we call fake news, is what I hear. There's this YouTuber who I actually really enjoy. His name is Tim Pool. The channel that he runs is TimCast, and I will leave a link in the description if you want to check out more of his stuff. He's more of a centrist than anything, right? And even he calls out the fake news epidemic. So check him out if you want. I would recommend it. I actually quite like a lot of his stuff. But getting back to this, it's not acceptable, right? Murder is never acceptable. Mass shooting is absolutely never acceptable. And anyone that has done this, made actions like this the norm, has started to kill people because they feel they need to. You're cowards, okay? Each and every one of you people that have made this thing look more and more happen more often. Sorry, that was a disjointed sentence and it was horrible. But anybody who's made this happen more often and look like a norm for America, you're a coward and you're pathetic. And I honestly think that you need to rethink what you're doing with your life. I don't blame guns for your actions, okay? I'm not going to take the easy way out. I blame each of you for these actions. The people who committed these atrocities for these actions, right? Because they were your actions. And anybody else who's considering doing anything like this, I blame you if you do it, when you do it, for your actions. I do not blame the gun that you had, the person that gave you the gun. I don't blame the system that you're a part of. I blame you because you took the choice and made the decision to go out and end lives. It's your fault, and that's where the buck stops. Now, let's look at the last proponent of this gruesome viewpoint, right? I know that this went a little bit off topic, but let's get back around to what we were talking about, right? This is the point that I'm trying to make with this whole video, and the point that Trump seems to ignore when he makes statements that suggest that, and I quote, the gruesome and grisly video games are now commonplace. And this is somehow the cause of these mass shootings, right? You cannot blame one item for something someone else does. People blame guns and games way too quickly. It's not a video game that makes a person violent. And yes, right, I will agree with you that research has shown that at least in males, aggression can increase while playing these games or these types of games. That doesn't mean that the video game is the reason anyone is going to go and beat someone to death, nor does it mean that people will purchase a gun in order to perform a mass shooting. And the proof is in the pudding. Right? We blame video games for these violent acts, yet we forget that there are millions of people in the world who play video games, who play these types of video games. Probably tens of millions who play these types of video games. How come there aren't millions of shootings the world over due to video games or video game violence? And when I say shootings, I don't just mean shootings. How come there's not millions of these kind of acts with maybe blades or knives or baseball bats the world over? Because there's tens of millions at least of people that play these kinds of video games, right? Look at Grand Theft Auto 5, the game you're watching right now probably. The game that I'm writing in, right? That game is basically all about video game violence. That game itself made $1 billion before it was even released. That's a hell of a lot of people. How come those people aren't out there committing violent acts or mass shootings or anything like that? Please explain that to me. And look, I know that this video is heavily disjointed, right? We're covering the histories of these guys and the reasons we believe they committed these horrendous acts. But in truth, I don't believe we can just blame video games or gun laws for that matter, right? And anyone suggesting that removing these is a complete deterrent needs to remember that acts like the Holocaust and World War I and Rome conquering Gaul, these all came prior to video games. So removing video games will not help us, right? And Rome came prior to guns. So where does the blame go in those cases, right? Expansion of world or trying to get rid of people? Huh? What are we going to blame for that scenario? Yeah? Anyways, look, that is all from me, guys. Please answer the question of the video down below. I am more than keen to hear what you guys have to say. Hit like if you enjoyed my rambling through this video, and hit subscribe if you want to hear more rambles from me. Again, let me know down below how you feel about any of these issues, anything that I have hit on in this topic. If you think that I'm completely wrong, or if you think that you agree with me, or if you can provide different points of perspective for anyone who might see this video, and how you think that we can avoid future acts like these from taking place, right? I'm more than keen to hear what you guys have to say. Otherwise, remain peaceful and stay loving. Okay, that's the message to you guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.